Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge, the podcast of Aspen Publishing. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and today my guest is a fellow dean, Elizabeth Kronk Warner. She is the Jefferson B. and Rita E. Fordham Presidential Dean and Professor of Law at the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. She's also a nationally recognized expert in the intersection of environmental and Indian law. Welcome.
Thank you, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's so exciting to have you, and you are one of the leaders among leaders. You are one of the people in the dean space who is very available to help others, leading nationally in committees for AALS or at the Law School Admission Council, where you and I both sit on the board. And I'm excited to talk about the start of your sixth year as the dean at S.J. Quinney. So as you start your sixth year, looking forward, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, so there's a lot to be excited about at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. So we have several programs that are launching this year and that are hopefully that we're laying the groundwork to launch in the future. So for example, this year we're going to have our third annual Cutting Sign to the Legal Profession workshop, which is a workshop for tribally enrolled and affiliated law students from around the country. So last year we had over 60 students who came from as far away as William and Mary and as close as in our own backyard here in Utah. And it's a really wonderful opportunity to bring these tribally affiliated and enrolled students to campus to focus in on job opportunities. As the smallest minoritized group within the legal profession, Native Americans have some unique challenges and opportunities that sometimes can get lost when we're talking about career development more broadly. And so it's a really wonderful opportunity to bring the students together. We're able to fundraise and provide support to cover the students' travel costs and their housing costs so that they can attend for free. A big thank you to St. Mary's, who contributes in supporting the activity, which we very much appreciate. And so the students can come together and they get dedicated career information, everything from how to put your best foot forward on your resume to mock interviewing. And then we also now have employers who come specifically to recruit. And every year we have more and more employers. It's starting to get to the point where I think we probably have more employers than we have students.
Oh, wow.
It's been a really wonderful opportunity to serve this population that has been underserved to date by our legal profession in general, really given kind of the small size of the Native American population within and among law professionals. So we're very excited about that program. That will be on October 4th and 5th of this year. So that's probably the first thing coming up that I'm very excited about. Also, this fall semester, I'm really excited because we have a presidential campaign and election. And I think that that will give us a lot of opportunity at Utah to talk to each other. And one thing that we've really been stressing here at the University of Utah is the idea of dignity and civility. And while we might not agree with everybody, and we certainly have strong opinions as to who we think should win the presidential election, that everybody deserves to be treated with dignity. And that's something I think is really special about Utah, is it's a place where folks from very different backgrounds can come together and hopefully talk with each other with civility and dignity. So that will be a great opportunity for us to practice those skills of civility and dignity. And then moving into the spring semester, it's going to be very exciting because we have our hard launch of our Spring to DC program. So the University of Utah has a building located in DuPont in Washington, D.C., where we have two buildings. One is a dormitory building and the other is a building for classrooms. And so our students are able to take law school classes there, but also we anticipate that the bulk of their credits will come from externships with local agencies, whether that's governmental agencies, nonprofits, perhaps working in Congress with the president. But it'll be a really wonderful opportunity for students who are interested to learn about how Washington, D.C. works. We'll have SJQ faculty who will be on-site teaching classes, and we also have a memorandum of understanding with the University of the District of Columbia Clark School of Law, where our students will be able to take some of their classes and their students will be able to take some of our classes. So I think it'll lead to a wonderfully robust educational experience for our students as they have opportunity to learn from different faculty and different students as well. So we're very excited about that. Also this year, what we're continuing to look into the possibility of a program at the University of Utah's Korea campus in Incheon, Korea. And so we'll be visiting there to kind of lay the groundwork for a potential future program. And so I'm very excited for what the future may hold in Korea for the S.J. Quinney College of Law.
Well, that's a tremendous amount of new initiatives to be excited about. I am pleased that St. Mary's can contribute to the program for Native American students. S.J. Quinney has been generous in supporting our Latina Network Summit, which offers some of the same types of opportunities to Latina students from across the country. And the more that we can amplify the voices and the opportunities for these underrepresented groups in our legal education and legal profession, I think it's very important for us to do so. The DC program, wow, how many students do you hope to have taking part in that?
We anticipate having between 10 and 12 students, which is roughly 10% of the third year class. So it should be pretty healthy program, big enough that we can kind of have robust conversation in the classes, but small enough that everybody can get very individualized attention, and especially help with finding their externship opportunities in Washington, D.C. So we're excited for this spring's cohort, and then we'll see how it grows from there.
Well, that's awesome. Great opportunity for your students. So these are some of the things that you're looking to do in your 6th year of deaning moving forward with your team. But you have 5 years of huge successes behind you. And so when you look back at these first 5 years at S.J. Quinney, what are you most excited about, proud of, just delighted by that the College of Law has been able to accomplish in these last 5 years?
Yeah, well, you're very kind to say that it was a good 5 years. It was not the 5 years I expected with the pandemic. So, when you think of kind of accomplishments from that roughly year and a half period, I think just keeping everybody alive and healthy and the College of Law running, I think everybody who was a dean at that time would agree that that was kind of the accomplishment of that era.
I do agree.
Yeah, yeah. There were some silver linings coming out of the pandemic. And one of the silver linings was the state of Utah was willing to do diploma privilege during the pandemic, recognizing that asking folks to sit for the bar exam in July of 2020 was a very hard ask in the middle of the pandemic, and potentially an unsafe ask as well. And so with the limited diploma privilege and kind of being able to study the effects of those students who went through diploma privilege and did not sit for the bar exam in July of 2020, that's opened up a really robust conversation around alternative licensure in Utah. And there have been several of us from the S.J. Quinney College of Law, including myself, but most notably our Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Louisa High, who've been leading the effort in developing a path towards alternative licensure. And we have a proposal that's currently pending for comments and is sitting in front of the Utah Supreme Court, as they are the ones that would ultimately decide whether or not to adopt it. So that was definitely an exciting development out of the last 5 years. And it really goes to another development, which is kind of at the heart of one of the things I love about being in Utah, is really the progressive and innovative nature of the state. So also during the last 5 years, we had the Utah Supreme Court approve the creation of what we call fondly the regulatory sandbox, but it's an agency which can approve non-lawyers to do legal work, and assuming that the non-lawyers meet the criteria that's established through the regulatory body. And this was really developed as a gap or an effort to solve the gap in terms of the dearth of legal services that are provided versus the need. So for example, the regulatory sandbox has looked at things like allowing for notarios, people who serve very much a lawyer-like role in Mexico, but are not lawyers, to do the work that they would have done in Mexico in Utah, to help serve that community better, as we have a very large population in Utah with roots from Mexico. Similarly, we looked at things like domestic violence advocates who traditionally can't represent survivors in the court, and maybe allowing those folks to take the next step and represent survivors in court. So it's been a really exciting time. And in terms of moving forward from that playing field that the state has developed, we now have a chief innovation officer at the S.J. Quinney College of Law who's really taking a hard look at what has already been accomplished through the regulatory sandbox and seeing where the College of Law can help amplify that, and then also build new opportunities, especially looking at things like public-private partnerships and legal technology to solve access to justice gaps. And so I'm really excited. She just officially started her role on July 1st. She just convened a meeting of 200 people who are interested in this topic. And so I'm excited that we have the opportunity at S.J. Quinney College of Law to build on that momentum from the past 5 years in really new and innovative ways.
Well, I saw news of that hire, and boy, you got somebody super impressive in the role.
Thank
Um,
you.
that's a great future, a look at future opportunities, but also considering the past progress that you've made. I love the idea of the notarios. That's something we haven't talked about here in Texas, but perhaps we should. Our Supreme Court has out for notice and comment the idea of having paraprofessionals take part in some limited representation activities in order to help address access to justice issues. So I do hope that it passes, and perhaps that's one of the things that we can look at.
Well, maybe we can get you some good data from Utah to support Texas taking a look.
Yeah, that would be great. I have made this argument before. I did a presentation earlier this year at the ABA Bar Leaders Conference and talked about paraprofessionals helping with legal deserts and access to justice issues there and other places. And someone stood up from a huge organization I'm not going to mention and was like, well, in Utah and Arizona, they've shown that this is not effective, the use of paraprofessionals. And I was like, I don't think I've heard that. And so do you have some initial results from the work that paraprofessionals have been able to do in Utah?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, I don't have that the specific data right in front of me, but I would disagree with whoever that was who said that. My understanding, so we of course have the regulatory sandbox where folks can propose really specific projects. But prior to that, we had our LPP limited licensure practitioner program, which allowed for folks to go through the program and obtain the ability to practice, as the name suggests, limited types of legal practice. So, for example, a lot of paralegals throughout the state have gone through this program so that they're able to add more legal assistance within their communities. And I have not heard anything negative about the folks coming out of that program. In fact, just the opposite. There's been a lot of support for it. I sit as one of the 2 deans of law schools in Utah. I sit as ex officio on the Utah State Bar Association, and we have representation from paralegals. And so I've had the opportunity to speak at length to that representative, and she has told me that the program, those of the folks that have gone through the program, it has been a positive experience. I think the rub with the program is it is an in-depth program, and so as a result, we have not had as many people as we might want to go through the program. And
Right.
so one of the things that our chief innovation officer is taking a really hard look at is how we as a law school might better support the program to hopefully have some more folks go through it. But I believe, the numbers are small, but my understanding is that folks have been really happy with the work being done by the people who have gone through the program.
That's terrific. I mean, anybody who can add to those available to serve those who need it is going to be a benefit.
Agreed.
Well, I applaud SJ Quinney and Utah itself. Your court sounds really forward thinking and open to new ideas, and that's wonderful. You're certainly, as a state, leading the way in a lot of these innovations to help with access to justice issues. One thing I wanted to ask you about, let's go back to the we have this presidential election this fall, and you talked about dignity and civility and reminding everyone of the professionalism that we must approach matters in our classrooms and out with. Are there specific examples of activities that you all are engaging in at SJ Quinney?
Yeah, so we've developed a series for this upcoming leading into the presidential election, but then beyond that, really, because this is an ongoing conversation, really focusing on how we can talk to each other with dignity, and reminding folks that law school is a place where you want to have vigorous disagreement. In fact, I would say that that's crucial to the profession of law. But if we lose our civility, then we lose our ability to really do that in a professional way. Now, I can't mandate that my students, engage in civil dialogue, but I do try to kind of model for them the benefits of doing that way, and also remind folks that the legal profession is very small and that you really start developing your reputation the minute you start law school. And you don't want to be thought of as a jerk. You don't want that kind of moniker hanging over your head for your entire career. And so we really encourage students to think about that and have those conversations. And we'll be having several dialogues around that topic, certainly this fall 24 semester and then moving forward.
Well, it's an important initiative, and I think all of us are trying to figure out ways to promote that kind of civil discourse and but robust dialogue on our campuses. Now, your leadership among deans is impressive, and you, as I mentioned, you're involved with AALS. You're currently the chair of the AALS Dean Steering Committee and AALS Membership Review Committee also. Can you tell us a little bit about what the AALS Dean Steering Committee does and what their priorities are in this particular moment in time in legal education?
Yeah, and just one caveat, I stepped down from chair of the membership review committee in January, but I probably need to update my CV, so that's probably on me and not on you. So yeah, I'm really excited about the Dean Steering Committee and the direction that we're going. So in the first half of 2024, we identified two areas that we kind of wanted to focus on in terms of providing guidance and resources for our decanal colleagues to help them when they encounter issues. So one of those groups was around the issue of freedom of speech and academic freedom. And they've already set up a resources page where deans can go when we encounter academic freedom and freedom of speech issues. We can go to that page and just get some information on best practices, information on what other law schools are doing, because this is such a hot topic in the legal academy right now that I think it's just inevitable. All of us will be challenged around these topics at some point in our careers as deans. So that is off and running and launched, and that is very exciting. The other topic that we chose to tackle was artificial intelligence. Given that I think artificial intelligence is going to have a significant impact on both how we educate our students and how they will be practicing law. And so similarly to the academic freedom and free speech working group, we want to create a resource page for law school deans so that they can go and find best practices and kind of learn from each other in terms of what every law school is doing. So those were kind of our two big initiatives. And then we're meeting at the end of September to discuss kind of what's coming up and what our role should be moving forward. And what's on the horizon, so we can kind of start to think about maybe if we should continue this model of creating resource pages for deans, or embark in a different type of activity. So it's really exciting. That's another thing I'm definitely looking forward to is working with that group, working with all the law school deans. I have to say it's been one of the joys of being a dean for 6 years is getting to work with other deans like you and getting to know folks like you and all the great things that you're doing like you are at St. Mary's. It is absolutely getting together with my fellow law school deans is definitely one of the things I look forward to the most in this role when that can happen a couple of times a year. And so I'm excited to work in this role, to work with Kelly Testy, our new executive director at the ALS, and kind of on her vision. So that will be very interesting to see where it goes. And I would applaud you. You likewise have had leadership positions with the ALS and with LSAC. So you are not one to rest on your laurels.
Well, thank you. It's, as you indicated, it's really a joy to be involved whenever we're working alongside fellow law school deans. I had a provost say to me once, there are 4,000 provosts, but, there are only 200 law deans. And that makes us a close bunch. And even though, 20 to 25% of us turn over in any given year, I think the level of support for the new deans and the existing deans is really unparalleled. So it's a pleasure.
I
Um,
agree.
Speaking of that kind of leadership among deans, you offer a program I have yet to go to, but I think it's in February during the Sundance Film Festival. And tell us about that.
Yes. So that program is always the second weekend of the Sundance Film Festival, which this year straddles the last weekend of January, first weekend of February. So your memory is excellent. And the purpose is obviously to co-locate the working group with the festival because we hope that people come and they enjoy Utah and get to experience Sundance. But also, it's really an opportunity. It's law school deans only, and it's meant to be very informal. And it's meant to be, we ask that people don't record, we ask that people don't quote folks and what they say in the meeting. And it's really an opportunity to brainstorm around these issues of belonging and community. So, how do we make everybody who's part of our law school communities feel like they both belong um, at the law school and that they feel comfortable enough, not only that they belong, but that they have the opportunity to thrive. And that's something that's really kind of goes to the state of Utah. And so I think it's really appropriate for us to host that as this idea that all groups deserve to thrive. So, as you may know, Utah was settled by some folk who were persecuted elsewhere, and they were able to come to Utah and flourish in Utah. And so we're excited that we can kind of keep that spirit going by hosting a conversation around making sure that present generations feel as welcome as the founding fathers of Utah did, and that present generations, and all people have an opportunity to thrive within Utah. And it's really exciting to host that conversation amongst all of our deans. Again, it's certainly a highlight of the year. I love showing our colleagues what I love so much about the state of Utah and kind of showing off the state of Utah a little bit, but I also always learn a ton of stuff from the conversation because dean colleagues like yourself are so brilliant. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity to come together and talk.
It sounds wonderful. And really, it's going to be on my short list for things to try to make sure to do this year. Um, the idea of the belonging and community conversation, I know it keeps coming up in every dean's gathering that we have. It's hard to be everything to everyone, but we're all facing some of these same challenges on our campus. So I'm glad that Utah is opening itself up to having those conversations. Before we go into kind of the final topic about legal education generally, I'd love to ask about your heritage. I know that there's a reason that you are so supportive of the Native American community, and perhaps you'd like to share that.
Sure. So I'm a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, which is we have 5 reservations, but our largest reservation is just outside of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, across the border from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So I grew up right across the way from Canada, so very far north, if you will. And I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, very close to the reservation. And so that's always been a big part of who I am. So, for example, even though I've lived all around the country and the world, I always like to come back to the reservation in the summer, especially over the July 4th holiday, because we have our summer ceremonies. We have our welcome back powwow where everybody in the community gathers. And it's just a place where my roots are really deep. My family's been there for time immemorial. The family cemetery is there, and so it's just a place where I really feel like I can belong, and it's a nice place to recharge. And that part of my existence really has informed my professional identity. So, as you nicely mentioned earlier, my area of research and teaching is federal Indian law and tribal law, and really how that intersects with environmental and natural resources. And so that's informed both from my early childhood, and then also later in life, after I was a lawyer, I became the chief appellate judge for my tribe, the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians Court of Appeals, and served my tribe in that role for many years, which was really wonderful work, working on everything from criminal issues to treaty rights issues to termination of parental rights. It was a really robust and interesting practice. And then I also, while I was living in Kansas, I was the director of the University of Kansas's Tribal Law and Government Center. And I served as a district judge for the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, which is the trial court level. And so, kind of a different look at the law. I remember the first time I had to arraign somebody, I was so nervous about it. I took like 15 minutes to arraign somebody and be like, do you understand that this is your right? Do you understand what this means? And the court staff were kind of making fun of me because normally arraignments take, 5 minutes, if that. And so it's been nice to have both experiences as a district court judge and as a court of appeals judge. And then I also played a role as the presiding judge over a healing to wellness court, which is a restorative justice court, where we had I was so proud. We had such a huge success rate, and it's not my credit, it's the credit to the folks who went through the program. But about 70 to 75% of the folks who went through our healing to wellness court did not reoffend, which is huge success if you look at that.
Very impressive.
Yeah, in relation to state. And it was just a wonderful opportunity because we would come together as a community and really talk to the person about how their behavior and their oftentimes addiction negatively impact the community, their family, but then also giving them the tools to succeed, talking about culture, for some folks talking about religion, and really get them back on their feet. And so that was a program I was very, very proud of and really enjoyed working with everybody there, and very much aligned with kind of customs and traditions of many tribes, because for a long time you couldn't, it's not like modern society where we have so many people in the United States that if you lock up one individual person, it might have a profound impact on that individual's family, but it doesn't necessarily impact the community that significantly. Whereas for tribes, because we tend to be much smaller, you lock up one person and you're having a tremendous impact on the tribal community and their family. So it kind of comes out of that tradition that we can't lose people, and so we have to work as a community to rehabilitate them. So I really enjoyed that work as well. Unfortunately, I had to step down when I took the deanship because, as you know, it's like a 30-hour a day, 7 days a week job. So I currently am not serving as a tribal court judge, but I really have enjoyed the opportunity to, through my professional career, broaden my own knowledge of my tribe and my upbringing, and then also bring in my personal experiences into my professional.
If you had any advice to give to those of us in legal education about advancing Native Americans in legal education and the profession, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. So the first is, I know many schools are concerned about focusing on racialized minorities following the recent Supreme Court case regarding affirmative action. And one thing I always like to remind folks is that if you are tribally affiliated, that is not a racial classification, it's a political classification. So we actually have a Supreme Court decision from 1974, Morton versus Mankari, that says because being tribally affiliated is focusing on your political relationship with your tribe and not necessarily your racial identity, that it's separate and apart from racial preferences. And so one thing I always like to remind folks, and if you look at the Department of Education's guidance, you'll see that there's a carve out for tribally affiliated individuals, I like to remind folks that there is that carve out. And so, well, people are probably taking a very hard look at how they treat racialized minority groups, that they do not need to include tribally affiliated individuals into those categories as of today. Of course, that could always change, but as of today.
That's really important information. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, it is. I think sometimes that's not something that is commonly known outside of those of us who practice Indian law. And the other thing is, I think oftentimes folks think that if they have Indian students come in, that they have to practice Indian law. And yes, I would say the majority of those of us who identify as Indians probably do end up practicing Indian law at some point in our careers. But there's also a bunch of folks who want to be a bankruptcy attorney or want to do contracts and don't really have interest in doing Indian law. So the first is not to pigeonhole folks into just because you're Native, you have to do Indian law, but also to recognize that for those folks who are interested in practicing other types of law, that they bring really a unique perspective, because there are some really exciting things that you can do in Indian country that you can't do, for example, in the state of Utah because of the applicable law. And so adding Native Americans and Indians to your classroom experience and to the legal profession, really, as we know, when you have folks from diverse backgrounds, we just get better decisions because you get different ideas coming to the table. And that it's important to remember that Native Americans and Indians bring those unique perspectives as well. We're sometimes easy to forget about us because we're, I think, about 2% of the population, and at any given time, there's between 2,000 and 3,000 natives who are barred and licensed in the United States. So we are small, but we are mighty, and we have a lot to add to any legal discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that advice. Now, before we conclude, I wonder if you can answer the question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what are your predictions for the future of legal education in the coming decade?
Yeah, so I'm probably, as I'm sure a lot of your guests have said, I'm really interested to see where generative AI is going to go and how that's going to impact the profession. I am not in the doom and gloom camp. I'm excited to see how generative AI can really supplement, if not, but not replace lawyers. So we were talking earlier about the access to justice gap. And so I'm really excited to see what generative AI may do to help folks with their legal needs who might not be able to afford a lawyer. Now, I think we're still a long way away from that because we need to have confidence in generative AI that folks are going to get the legal representation they need. And so I could see a world where lawyers aren't replaced. You still, for example, might have a lawyer who's reading and reviewing documents, but whereas before, maybe that lawyer could serve 10 clients at any given time, with the assistance of generative AI, maybe that lawyer could then serve 100 clients at any given time. And so I'm really hopeful that generative AI is going to turn out to be a helpful tool for lawyers. We'll still need lawyers to review the product and to have the judgment, to go to court. I don't think we're going to be in a world anytime soon where people want robots representing them in court, or they want, robots overseeing a trial. So I think we'll still have a presence there, but I'm really hopeful that it really will augment the work that lawyers do. And there's a $4 billion access to justice gap estimated between legal needs and what's currently provided. And so the reality is, we're just not in a situation as lawyers to be able to help everybody. And so I'm really hopeful that it's a tool that can help society with the legal needs that it has. So I'm excited to see where generative AI goes. I'm also very excited because a lot of law schools are kind of moving beyond the traditional degree program. So many of us have always had a JD or an LLM program, but a lot of folks have launched a master's program. So for example, St. Mary's has been a leader in hosting conferences to discuss masters of legal studies. And some law schools are even getting into the undergraduate space. And going back to that theme of access to justice, that's another thing that really excites me, because we have we call it Masters of Legal Studies, an MLS program. And the folks who are in that program, they don't want to be lawyers. They don't need to be lawyers. A lot of them are already established in their careers, are older, they've been successful, but they really want to understand the law so that when they're dealing with lawyers, they have the tools to do that at a higher level. And so I think the MLS really plays an important role for society, again, kind of increasing um, um, the understanding of the law. And then the bachelor's idea really excites me too, because I love our JD program, but we have roughly any given year around 100 people per year entering our JD program. Overall, we have 300 students. So we are small at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. And, I think our impact is bigger than our footprint, but we still can't help and serve everyone that we would like to because of those numbers. And so at this day and age where I think understanding of democracy and the rule of law is so incredibly important to civil society, having the opportunity to educate and work with undergraduate students who may or may not go on to get their JD, but still giving them those skills is really exciting to me and I think beneficial to society. So I'm kind of excited to see this diversification of degree programs that law schools are looking at, online programs that law schools are doing. I know that again is a space where St. Mary's has been a leader. And then also how generative AI is going to help us do our jobs better.
Well, those are all reasons to be optimistic about the profession and its evolution. So thank you so much, Dean Kronk Warner, for joining us from the S.J. Quinney College of Law today, and best of luck as you start this new and exciting year.
Thank you so much, Patty. This was wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this conversation and would like to hear from other thought leaders in legal education, you can listen to other episodes of the Aspen Leading Edge podcast from the Aspen Publishing Podcast website or your favorite podcast channels. Thanks for listening.